Welcome back to Midnight Affair Tales. Thank you for joining us. Bryson Calloway never thought this would be how his marriage ended. The house was too quiet. A strange kind of silence, the kind that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He stepped inside, the weight of the keys in his hand feeling heavier than usual. Something was wrong. He felt it deep in his gut. Then he heard it. A breathy laugh. Soft murmurs. A sound he had never expected to hear in his own home. His wife's voice, sweet and sultry, but not for him. Bryson moved silently, his body running on instinct. He stepped down the hallway, heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. He didn't want to believe it. He couldn't. But when he reached the bedroom door, his bedroom door, he saw it. Lillian, his wife, tangling herself around another man. Not just any man. Conrad Holloway, her boss. The smug, arrogant CEO who thought the world belonged to him. Bryson's fingers clenched into fists. His stomach twisted into something sharp and unbearable. His world shattered in an instant. The woman he had built a life with, the woman he trusted more than anyone, was lying there with another man, laughing, whispering, loving. His first instinct was rage. The kind that burned like wildfire, ready to destroy everything in its path. But then, a different thought took over. A cold, calculated clarity. He owned Conrad's office building. He controlled the very ground this man stood on. And neither of them had a single clue. Bryson swallowed his fury, forcing his expression into something unreadable. Instead of barging in, instead of screaming, instead of breaking down, he stepped back. Because why react when you can ruin? Bryson sat at the bar, fingers wrapped around a glass of whiskey. The ice clinked as he swirled it, but he wasn't drinking. He was thinking. Every word Lillian had said to him before leaving still echoed in his mind. You were never enough for me, Bryson. Her voice had been cruel. Cold. Like the past 10 years of marriage had meant nothing. Conrad gives me the life I deserve. The life she deserved? His jaw tightened. The life she deserved was built on lies. For years he had let her believe he was just a simple investor. Comfortable but nothing extraordinary. He never flaunted his wealth. He never needed to. But now he realized that was his mistake. He had let her underestimate him. Bryson placed his glass down, the sound sharp against the wooden bar top. His phone vibrated. He already knew who it was before he even looked. Lillian. A part of him wanted to answer. Wanted to ask her why. Wanted to yell, to break, to let the pain take over. But he didn't. Instead, he slid his phone into his pocket and turned to the bartender. Get me a new drink, he said. Something expensive. He had work to do. Bryson sat in his downtown office, staring at the lease contract for Holloway Enterprises. He ran his fingers over the termination clause. A slow smirk curled his lips. Conrad had no idea who he was messing with. The man had built his company's headquarters inside a building Bryson owned. And soon he'd be forced out, with nothing. Bryson reached for his phone and made a call. Ryan, he said, speaking to his top lawyer. I need you to start preparing documents. Holloway Enterprises will be getting a notice soon. A lease termination? Ryan asked. Not yet, Bryson said. I want them to struggle first. Suffer. Let them think they're safe. Then, when the timing is perfect, we pull the rug from under them. Pause. Then Ryan chuckled. Got it? This is going to be brutal. Bryson's smirk deepened. That's the point. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The pain, the betrayal, it was all fueling him now. Lillian thought she had traded up. She had no idea she had just set herself up for destruction. Bryson wasn't a man who acted on impulse. That's what separated him from men like Conrad, who lived off greed and ego, making reckless decisions. No, Bryson was patient. He sat in his dimly lit study, his laptop screen glowing as he scrolled through files. Names, transactions, property records. He had access to more than Lillian or Conrad ever imagined. A single document caught his attention. Holloway Enterprises financial records. Bryson smirked. It was worse than he thought. Conrad wasn't as wealthy as he pretended to be. His business thrived on illusions. Lavish events, luxury offices, high-profile deals. But underneath? Debt. Loans. Overextension. He was living on borrowed time. Bryson tapped his fingers against the desk. He could easily pull the trigger now, send the lease termination, kick Conrad out, and enjoy the destruction. But that wasn't enough. He wanted Conrad to feel it. To watch everything crumble bit by bit, helpless to stop it. Picking up his phone, he dialed a number. Ethan. A voice on the other end answered. It's been a while, Calloway. I need a favor, Bryson said, his voice cool. I need a full background check on Conrad Holloway. Find out where he's bleeding the most. There was a pause. Then Ethan chuckled. This sounds personal. Bryson's grip on the phone tightened. It is. Ethan let out a low whistle. Got it? Give me a few days. I'll find everything. Bryson leaned back, exhaling. The game had begun. Conrad Holloway stepped into his office, his usual arrogance radiating in every step. He adjusted his suit, flashing a charming smile at his assistant. Morning, Grace. Coffee? Grace hesitated. There's a problem, sir. Conrad frowned. Problem? She handed him a folder. The leasing office sent this over this morning. Something about the renewal terms? Conrad waved her off and flipped through the papers. His eyes narrowed. The new lease agreement required double the rent. What the hell is this? He muttered, skimming the fine print. Bryson Calloway. He had never cared to know his landlord's name before. Just another silent investor. But now the name burned into his mind. He grabbed his phone and dialed his CFO. Andrew, he barked. Who the hell is Calloway? And why is our rent being doubled? A long pause. Then Andrew's voice came through, hesitant. Sir. You're not going to like this. Try me. Calloway, he's the building's primary owner. And he's a billionaire. Conrad's stomach dropped. Billionaire? The same man Lillian had left? He gritted his teeth. Fix it. Negotiate. Do whatever it takes. Andrew hesitated. That's the problem, sir. He's not negotiating. Conrad slammed his fist on the desk. What the hell was Bryson Calloway playing at? Lillian adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist, flashing it in the restaurant's dim lighting. Across from her, Conrad sat with his phone in hand, scowling at the screen. Conrad, she purred, sipping her wine. Put the phone down. He didn't even glance up. Lillian forced a smile, even as irritation bubbled inside her. She had left Bryson because she wanted more. More money. More luxury. More power. But lately? Conrad had been distracted. She reached across the table, running a manicured hand over his wrist. What's wrong, baby? He exhaled sharply, finally setting his phone down. It's business, he muttered. Some bullshit with our building lease. The owner is playing games with me. Lillian frowned. The owner? Conrad nodded. Some guy named Calloway. The name sent a chill down her spine. For the first time in months, guilt flickered inside her. Bryson. She hadn't spoken to him since she walked out of their house, her head held high. She had expected him to beg, to fight for her, to lose himself without her. Instead, he had disappeared, like she had never existed. And now he was the man Conrad was worried about? She forced a laugh. Forget him, babe. You're Conrad Holloway. You'll handle it. But deep down, for the first time since she left Bryson, she felt fear. Bryson watched from his penthouse balcony, his fingers loosely gripping a glass of scotch. Below, the city lights flickered like stars against the pavement. His phone buzzed. He didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. Ryan. His attorney. Tell me, Bryson said, taking a slow sip. It's happening, Ryan responded. Holloway Enterprises is scrambling. They're reaching out to investors, but, well, let's just say you've made sure none of them will bite. A smirk tugged at Bryson's lips. Perfect. Any word from Conrad himself? He's trying to play it cool, Ryan said. But his people are panicking. Your name is in every one of their meetings now. Bryson exhaled, enjoying the weight of those words. He had been the man no one noticed. The quiet investor. The one who never needed attention, never played the flashy billionaire role. But now Conrad knew his name. Bryson turned, setting his glass down as he walked inside. His office was dark except for the soft glow of his computer screen. On it, security footage from the Holloway Enterprises building played in real time. He zoomed in on Conrad's office. The man looked stressed. Good. Then something unexpected happened. The door to Conrad's office opened and Lillian stepped inside. Bryson's smirk faded. She was dressed in a designer gown, looking every bit the trophy wife she had betrayed him to become. And now, She was whispering something to Conrad, placing a hand on his shoulder, looking concerned. Bryson's jaw tightened. She was starting to realize the life she chose wasn't as stable as she thought. But it was too late. Far, far too late. Conrad pinched the bridge of his nose. His temples ached from stress. Lillian sat across from him, watching him with those two perfect eyes. He used to love that about her. How effortlessly she draped herself in beauty. How she made him look more powerful just by standing at his side. But now all he saw was a woman who expected too much. "This is just a setback," Conrad muttered, standing and pacing his office. "I'll handle it." Lillian tilted her head, swirling the wine in her glass. "Are you sure?" Conrad shot her a glare. Her lips curled into a slow, almost mocking smile. "You've been tense lately," she continued. "The man who swept me off my feet was untouchable. But now you look rattled." Conrad clenched his fists. "Do you know who Calloway is?" he snapped. Lillian hesitated. Conrad scoffed. "That's what I thought. He's not just some landlord. He's a ghost. A billionaire who never puts his face in the news. A man who holds power but never flaunts it." He leaned over the desk, his eyes dark. "And I have no idea what the hell he wants from me." Lillian's expression flickered. She took a slow sip of wine before setting the glass down. Then, in a voice just barely above a whisper, she asked, "What if this isn't about you?" Silence. Conrad stared at her. Lillian's heart pounded. She didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. But there was only one other person who had a reason to bring Conrad to his knees. And she had left him. Bryson Calloway. Her stomach twisted. She had betrayed him. Destroyed him. And yet, a terrifying thought slithered into her mind. What if he had never been broken at all? Bryson knew this was when the walls would start closing in. He wasn't just attacking Conrad's company. He was attacking his reputation. And a man like Conrad Holloway? Reputation was everything. Bryson sat at his desk, reading the reports Ryan had sent over. Holloway Enterprises stocks were plummeting. Investors were backing out. Deals were falling apart. It was happening faster than expected. Then his phone buzzed. A known number. He let it ring twice before answering. Bryson Calloway. His voice was calm. Controlled. Silence. Then, "I assume you're enjoying this, Conrad?" Bryson smiled to himself. The arrogance in his voice was already cracking. "I don't know what you mean," Bryson said smoothly. "I'm just a businessman. And it looks like your business is struggling." Conrad's breath was sharp. "You think you can take me down? You think you're untouchable?" Bryson leaned back in his chair. "I think you should start packing up your office." Silence. Bryson imagined Conrad's expression, jaw tight, fists clenched. The realization sinking in. "You don't get to do this," Conrad finally growled. Bryson let out a low chuckle. "Oh, but I do. And I will." Then, before Conrad could say another word, Bryson hung up. He exhaled, tapping his fingers against the desk. The fun was just beginning. Lillian couldn't sleep. The penthouse suite she once adored now felt suffocating, the walls pressing in as the city lights cast eerie shadows on the ceiling. She turned in bed, glancing at Conrad. He was sprawled out, his face creased with stress even in sleep. He was slipping. The man she had left Bryson for, the man who had promised her everything, was losing control. And worst of all, it wasn't an accident. Bryson. His name kept circling in her mind, an unshakable presence. She hadn't heard from him in months. No calls, no desperate attempts to win her back. She had assumed he was broken. Destroyed. But now he was the one standing at the edge of Conrad's empire, watching it burn. Lillian sat up, her heart pounding. She needed answers. She grabbed her phone and hesitated before typing his number. For a long moment she just stared. Then finally, she hit dial. 1 ring. 2. 3. Click. The call connected, and the line was silent for a moment before a voice spoke. "I was wondering when you'd call." His voice was calm. Too calm. Her breath caught in her throat. "Bryson," she whispered. A beat of silence. Then, in a voice that sent a shiver down her spine, he said, "Miss me?" Bryson leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable as Lillian's shallow breathing filled the line. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she broke the silence. "I know what you're doing," she whispered. "This isn't about business. It's about me. Bryson chuckled, a low and dangerous sound. You give yourself too much credit. She swallowed hard. You're trying to ruin him. Bryson exhaled, swirling the ice in his glass. No, Lillian. He ruined himself. I'm just making sure he drowns. Lillian closed her eyes, gripping the sheets. Why now? Why after all this time? Bryson's tone turned cold. Because I wanted to see how long it would take for you to realize that you made the biggest mistake of your life. Her chest tightened. She had spent months convincing herself that she had made the right choice. That Conrad was better. That Bryson had been too small, too predictable. But now she was seeing the truth. Bryson had never been weak. He had just been waiting. And now the man she had betrayed was the one pulling all the strings. Before she could say another word, the line went dead. She stared at the screen. Bryson had just hung up on her. For the first time since she left him, she felt truly powerless. Conrad stood in his office, staring at the city skyline with a clenched jaw. His company was falling apart. Clients were backing out. His best employees were resigning. And now his banks were hesitating. He had spent years building Holloway Enterprises into a powerhouse. His name was supposed to mean strength. But now it was turning into a joke. His intercom buzzed. Sir, Grace's voice came through, hesitant. There's someone here to see you. Who? Conrad snapped. A long pause. Then, Bryson Calloway. The name sent a chill down Conrad's spine. Slowly he turned. Send him in. The door opened and Bryson walked in, calm as ever. No flashy suit. No arrogance. Just quiet, unshakable power. Conrad clenched his jaw. You've been busy. Bryson smirked. You have no idea. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Conrad took a step closer. What do you want? Bryson tilted his head. I think you already know. Conrad scoffed. You think you can just waltz in here and... Bryson cut him off. I own this building. Silence. Conrad's breath caught. No, it couldn't be. Bryson stepped closer, his voice low. You didn't even bother to check, did you? Too busy being the big boss to notice who actually holds the power. Conrad's face paled. Bryson smiled. Time's up, Holloway. Conrad Holloway had been humiliated before. But never like this. He sat in his leather chair, fists clenched as Bryson's words echoed in his mind. I own this building. His entire empire. His multi-million-dollar headquarters, his reputation, his carefully built illusion, was standing on ground he didn't even own. And now Bryson Calloway was taking it away. Conrad forced himself to breathe. You're making a mistake. Bryson tilted his head. Am I? You think you can ruin me? That you can walk into my office, throw your weight around and win? Bryson smirked, pulling something from his pocket. A folder. Conrad's stomach twisted. Bryson dropped it on the desk. Open it. Conrad hesitated. Then slowly he reached forward and flipped it open. His blood ran cold. Bank statements. Fake invoices. Fraudulent contracts. His entire web of dirty deals laid out in black and white. Bryson leaned forward. You're already drowning, Conrad. And this is just the beginning. Conrad's jaw clenched. You son of a... Bryson held up a hand. I could leak this to the media right now. Or send it to the authorities. Or maybe, just maybe, I'll let your investors see it first. Conrad's breath came in sharp, panicked bursts. He was trapped. Bryson smiled, standing. Enjoy your evening, Holloway. Then just before he left, he glanced over his shoulder. Oh, and tell Lillian? He smirked. She's not worth saving. And with that he walked out, leaving Conrad Holloway crumbling in his own office. Lillian sat in the back of a luxury car, staring blankly at the city lights rushing past. She had spent the last few hours trying to ignore the rising panic in her chest. The whispers. The way Conrad was suddenly avoiding her. The news articles that were starting to spread. Her perfect life, the one she had traded everything for, was cracking. Her phone vibrated. She grabbed it, her breath catching. A message from an unknown number. She hesitated, then opened it. One line. Are you starting to regret it? Her heart stopped. Bryson. Her fingers tightened around the phone. She should have deleted the message. Should have ignored it. Should have pretended she didn't care. Instead she typed back. Meet me. A response came instantly. I already have everything I need. Lillian's chest ached. She had left him for a man who promised her everything. And now, she was about to lose it all. Her hands trembled as she typed her next words. Please. But this time? No answer came. Bryson was done playing her games. Conrad slammed his office door shut, pacing like a caged animal. His phone buzzed again, another call from his board members. He ignored it. His hands shook as he loosened his tie. This couldn't be happening. He had spent years building this company, forging connections, winning the game. And now it was slipping through his fingers. His intercom buzzed. Sir, Grace's voice was hesitant. The press, they're waiting in the lobby. The story about the falsified contracts is spreading. Conrad cursed under his breath. Damn it. He slammed his hand on the desk. I don't have time for this. Grace hesitated. And, there's someone else here to see you. Conrad gritted his teeth. Who now? Pause. Lillian. His entire body tensed. Of course. Conrad exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. The last thing he needed was Lillian asking questions. But she wasn't going away. Send her in, he muttered. A moment later, the door swung open. Lillian stepped inside, her arms crossed. Her expression was calm. Too calm. Conrad braced himself. And then, in a voice that made his stomach sink, she said, Tell me the truth, Conrad. Are we about to lose everything? Pause here. Dear good listeners. A lot of people listen to the story but only 9% subscribe. I work hard to bring you amazing stories every day. This time, my goal is to hit 2,000 subscribers this month. So, my awesome audience, show some love. Hit that subscribe button now. Let's continue our story. Lillian stood in Conrad's office, arms crossed, but her confidence was slipping. She had spent months believing she had won. That she had traded a quiet life for a powerful one. But now the man she had left Bryson for looked weak. Conrad turned, rubbing his face. I have it under control. Lillian's stomach tightened. That was a lie. She had seen the articles. The news cycle was turning, investors were pulling out, and now? The press was waiting in the lobby, hunting for blood. This isn't just a bad deal, is it? She asked quietly. Conrad stiffened. Her heart pounded. Conrad. Silence. Then, he exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of his desk. It's Callaway, he admitted, his voice low. He's orchestrating this. Every failed deal, every investor turning their back, it's all because of him. Lillian felt the room spin. Bryson. She clenched her jaw, stepping closer. Why? Why would he go this far? Conrad let out a bitter laugh. Because he's not the man you thought he was. Lillian's breath hitched. She had spent so long underestimating Bryson, believing he was just an ordinary investor. But he wasn't. He was a monster in disguise. And now, he was hunting them. Lillian swallowed hard. For the first time since leaving Bryson, she felt something she never thought she would. Regret. Bryson walked into the towering law firm, his suit crisp, his movements controlled. He wasn't just here for Holloway's business. He was here to bury him. Ryan, his lawyer, greeted him with a satisfied nod. Everything's in motion. By the end of the week, Holloway Enterprises will be facing fraud investigations. Bryson's smirk was slow, calculated. Good. Ryan hesitated. You do know this could destroy him permanently, right? He might never recover. Bryson's expression didn't waver. That's the point. Ryan let out a low whistle. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Bryson turned toward the conference room. Come on, let's finish this. Inside, a team of legal experts was already seated. Documents, contracts, evidence, all spread across the table. Bryson took a seat, rolling up his sleeves. This ends now. 4 years he had built his empire quietly, choosing to stay in the shadows. But Conrad had taken something from him. Now, he was taking everything back. Conrad's world was falling apart. He sat in his penthouse, a glass of whiskey shaking in his grip. The phone kept ringing, his board, his lawyers, his enemies. Every call brought the same news. Bryson Callaway had won. Lillian paced in front of him, her arms folded. Say something. Conrad let out a hollow laugh. What do you want me to say? That I underestimated him? That I let my ego blind me? Lillian clenched her fists. You said you could fix this. Conrad slammed his glass onto the table. Do you think I planned this? His voice was sharp. Do you think I wanted to be backed into a corner by a man I didn't even consider a threat? Lillian's breath hitched. Because that's what this was. They had never considered Bryson a threat. And that had been their biggest mistake. Conrad ran a hand through his hair, his eyes dark. There's one last move I can make. Lillian frowned. What? He exhaled, staring out at the city. I need to talk to Calloway myself. Lillian's stomach twisted. This wasn't going to end well. The tension in Conrad's penthouse was suffocating. Lillian stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the city below, her arms wrapped around herself. She had chosen this life. She had left Bryson, thinking she had traded up. But now she was watching it collapse. Conrad grabbed his phone and hesitated before dialing. His fingers trembled slightly, but he masked it well. Lillian turned to face him. Who are you calling? Conrad's jaw tightened. Calloway. Lillian's heart pounded. What do you think he's going to do? Help you? She scoffed. Conrad shot her a sharp look. I don't have a choice. Lillian swallowed, her throat dry. The man she had betrayed was now the one controlling their fate. And she wasn't sure if there was any way out. The phone rang once. Twice. Then click. Bryson's voice came through, smooth and unreadable. Well, this is a surprise. Conrad forced a chuckle, though it sounded strained. I figure we should talk. Man to man. Bryson was silent for a moment. Then, you mean beg? Lillian sucked in a breath. Conrad's grip on the phone tightened. Listen, Calloway. We don't have to do this. Bryson hummed. Do what? Watch you lose everything. Conrad clenched his jaw. I can fix this. Bryson let out a low chuckle. Oh, I know you want to fix it. But here's the thing, Holloway, you can't. Lillian took a step closer to Conrad, whispering, Tell him we can negotiate. We can offer him something. Conrad shot her a glare but swallowed his pride. There has to be something you want. Bryson's response was ice cold. There was. Pause. And she left me. Lillian's stomach dropped. Silence. Then Bryson exhaled. You should start packing your things, Conrad. Then click. The line went dead. Lillian's breath was shallow, her mind spinning. Conrad's face was pale. His hands shook. For the first time in his life he had lost. And Bryson had made sure he felt it. Bryson stood in his office, staring at the skyline. The city he had built his empire in. The city that now belonged to him alone. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Lillian. His lips curled into a slow smirk. Pathetic. For months she had been silent. Living in luxury, pretending he never existed. But now she was reaching out. He let the phone ring. She called again. And again. Finally he answered. Lillian. His voice was cold. Unmoved. There was silence. Then. Her voice cracked. I need to see you. Bryson exhaled slowly. No, you don't. Bryson, please, she whispered. I made a mistake. Bryson chuckled, shaking his head. You think I don't know that? Her breath hitched. I don't know what to do, she admitted. Everything's falling apart. Bryson's grip on his phone tightened. He could hear the desperation in her voice. The fear. He could end this right now. Crush her completely. Or, he could let her suffer a little longer. His smirk deepened. Meet me tomorrow, he said. Lillian's breath of relief was audible. Thank you. Bryson hung up before she could finish. Tomorrow she would come crawling back. And he would be waiting. Lillian couldn't sleep. She lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Tomorrow she would see Bryson again. The man she had once believed would never recover without her. And now he was the one holding all the power. She got up and walked toward the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Was this karma? Was this what she deserved? She thought back to the night she left him. The way she had walked out without looking back. You were never enough for me, Bryson. Her own words haunted her. Because the truth? She had never been enough for him. She had taken his silence as weakness. But Bryson had never been weak. He had just been watching. Waiting. And tomorrow? Tomorrow she would have to face him. And for the first time in her life, she was afraid. Lillian stepped out of the car, her heart pounding against her ribs. The valet opened the door to the high-rise building and she hesitated. This was his building. Not just the office, Everything. The walls. The floors. The very air she was breathing. Bryson owned it all. She swallowed hard and stepped inside. The receptionist barely spared her a glance. "Mr. Calloway is expecting you." Her throat tightened. She had imagined this moment so many times, rehearsed what she would say, how she would make him understand. But now she wasn't sure if anything she said would even matter. The elevator ride was suffocating. The higher she went, the harder it became to breathe. Then the doors opened. Bryson stood near the window, his back turned to her, hands in his pockets. The sight of him sent a painful jolt through her chest. He looked different, stronger, untouchable. He didn't turn around when he spoke. "You wanted to see me?" Lillian took a slow step forward. "Bryson, why?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. She hesitated. I made a mistake." Bryson finally turned. His gaze was sharp, piercing through her. She used to know him. Used to know how he felt just by looking at him. But now he was unreadable. Cold. Unforgiving. "I thought you left for a better life," he said smoothly. "How's that working out for you?" Lillian's breath hitched. "You don't understand." Bryson let out a low chuckle. "Oh, I understand, Lillian. I understand perfectly." She swallowed hard. She had never seen him like this before. And the worst part? She knew she had done this to herself. Lillian exhaled shakily. "I never meant to hurt you." Bryson leaned back against his desk, watching her with unreadable eyes. "You didn't hurt me." His voice was steady. Calm. Too calm. She blinked. "What?" Bryson smirked. "You think I lost sleep over you? That I spent nights wondering where I went wrong?" Lillian's stomach twisted. "Bryson, I let you go the moment you walked out that door." Her chest ached. No, that wasn't possible. She had believed he would break, that he would suffer. But instead he had thrived. Without her. She clenched her fists. "I was wrong." Bryson tilted his head. "You don't say." She took a step closer. "I don't want this life anymore. I don't want Conrad." Bryson held up a hand, stopping her. "Let me be perfectly clear, Lillian." Her breath caught in her throat. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You are nothing to me." Lillian's heart shattered. She had spent months believing she could come back, that she could fix this. But now, standing in front of the man she had betrayed, she realized the truth. She had lost him forever. And there was nothing she could do to change that. Bryson straightened his tie, looking down at Lillian with quiet amusement. This was it. The final moment. She had expected mercy. But she had forgotten. Bryson Calloway was no longer the man she once knew. "You thought you could come back here and undo everything?" he asked. Lillian swallowed hard. "You walked out on me, Lillian. You chose him." Her lips trembled. "I was stupid. I was selfish. But You were right about one thing." Bryson smirked. Her breath hitched. "You said I wasn't enough for you." A long pause. Then his expression turned ice cold. "But you were never enough for me." Lillian's chest caved. She had spent months trying to convince herself that she had made the right choice. But the truth? She had lost the best thing she ever had. Bryson straightened his suit jacket. "We're done here." Lillian's eyes burned with unshed tears. She wanted to fight, to beg, to make him see that she had changed. But it was too late. He was already gone. And she was nothing. Bryson stepped out of the towering skyscraper, the crisp night air wrapping around him like a quiet victory. For the first time in months he felt light. Free. Lillian was gone. For good. No more second chances. No more apologies. No more ghosts of a woman who had once meant everything to him. As he walked toward his car, his phone buzzed. A message from Ryan. "It's done. Holloway Enterprises has officially collapsed. The lawsuits are piling up. Investors are cutting ties. It's over." Bryson leaned against his car, exhaling slowly. It was finally over. He had won. But strangely, he didn't feel the overwhelming thrill he thought he would. Yes, Conrad was ruined. Lillian was lost. Justice had been served. But deep down, Bryson knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about moving on. And now, he finally could. Bryson sat in his private office, overlooking the city that once felt too small for him. Now, it was his empire. The business world was buzzing with Holloway's downfall. Some called it a mystery. Others whispered about the shadow figure behind it all. But no one knew the truth, and Bryson preferred it that way. His door opened and Ryan stepped in, dropping a thick file on his desk. "Your next project." Bryson arched a brow. "Already?" Ryan smirked. "You're a shark, Calloway. You don't stop moving." Bryson leaned back, smirking. He was right. The fire inside him hadn't died. It had evolved. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore. This was about building something even greater. Something untouchable. And this time, no one would stand in his way. The restaurant was dimly lit, the kind of place where business deals and secrets were exchanged over expensive wine. Bryson rarely allowed himself nights off. But tonight felt different. He wasn't here for a deal. He was here for her. Across the table sat Sophia Reed. Sure. Intelligent. Unapologetic. She wasn't just another socialite, desperate for attention. She was a force of her own. And for the first time in years, Bryson felt something he hadn't expected. Interest. She smirked at him over her glass. "You've been staring for the last 2 minutes, Calloway?" Bryson chuckled, swirling his drink. "Am I not allowed to be impressed?" Sophia leaned in slightly, her gaze challenging. "That depends. Are you easily impressed?" His smirk deepened. "Not at all." A slow silence stretched between them. For so long Bryson had been chasing ghosts, fighting a war that had already been won. But now he was ready to start again. And this time, he wouldn't be looking back. Bryson had always believed that true power wasn't about money. It wasn't about owning buildings, winning lawsuits, or watching men like Conrad fall to their knees. True power was the ability to walk away, untouched, unshaken, and stronger than before. And that's exactly what he was doing. He sat in his penthouse, the skyline glowing behind him, sipping a drink as he reviewed the latest news on Holloway Enterprises. The headlines were brutal. "Holloway Empire crumbles. Conrad Holloway faces financial and legal disaster. Insiders reveal, Conrad Holloway's investors flee, leaving him in ruins. Former CEO of Holloway Enterprises disappears from public eye." Bryson smirked as he read the articles. Conrad was done. The lawsuits alone would bury him for years. His name was no longer one of power, it was a warning. Don't be reckless. Don't underestimate the wrong man. Bryson's phone buzzed. He glanced at the caller ID. Lillian. Again. For weeks she had been trying. Calling. Texting. Begging. But Bryson? He had stopped answering. Because the truth was simple. She was no longer a part of his world. He deleted the call, tossed the phone onto his desk, and leaned back in his chair. The past was dead. And now, it was time to move forward. "Let me get this straight," Sophia said, tilting her head. "You single-handedly brought down one of the biggest marketing firms in the city, ruined a man's career, and completely ignored your ex-wife's desperate attempts to crawl back?" Bryson smirked. "When you put it like that, it sounds harsh." Sophia sipped her wine, her lips curling. Sounds deserved. They sat at an exclusive rooftop bar, the city humming beneath them. It had been weeks since Bryson had last thought about Conrad or Lillian, and he realized something strange. He didn't care anymore. Not in the way he once did. Sophia set her glass down and leaned in slightly. "So, what's next for you, Calloway?" Bryson exhaled, glancing out at the skyline. "I used to think revenge was enough. That once I destroyed Conrad, I'd feel complete." Sophia arched a brow. "And?" Bryson chuckled. "Turns out, revenge is just a chapter. Not the whole story." Sophia studied him for a moment before nodding. "Smart man." Bryson leaned forward, his gaze locked onto hers. "I like to think so." She smirked. "Then prove it." And for the first time in years, Bryson realized something. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was finally living. Bryson stood in front of the massive glass window in his new corporate headquarters. His empire. It had taken years of work, patience, and control to get here. But now, he was at the top. He watched as his employees moved through the sleek offices below, all of them dedicated to his vision. Not just another businessman. Not just another investor. Bryson Calloway was a name that mattered now. Ryan walked in, placing a thick folder on his desk. "The final contracts. Once you sign these, you'll officially own the last of Holloway's remaining assets." Bryson smirked. The final nail in Conrad's coffin. He picked up the pen and signed without hesitation. Ryan let out a low chuckle. And just like that, it's over. Bryson nodded. It was over the moment he underestimated me. Ryan hesitated. And Lillian? Bryson didn't even blink. She's a ghost. Ryan grinned. Damn. Cold. Bryson smirked. No. Just done. He turned back to the window, watching the city that he now owned. The past was gone. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the revenge, it had all led to this. A legacy that no one could take from him. And this time? Bryson Calloway had always known power was a game of control, of patience, of knowing when to strike and when to wait. And now he was no longer just playing the game. He owned it. Sitting in his office, he watched the latest financial reports scroll across the multiple screens in front of him. Every metric, every acquisition, every deal, it all led to one undeniable fact. Calloway Enterprises was now the most dominant private investment firm in the city. And Conrad Holloway? A relic of the past. Bryson leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly as Ryan walked in. His lawyer and closest confidant placed a thick envelope on the desk. Ryan smirked. You're going to love this. Bryson raised an eyebrow but didn't speak. Instead, he picked up the envelope and opened it, pulling out a neatly printed report. Subject: Conrad Holloway. His smirk deepened as he scanned the document. Looks like your old friend finally hit rock bottom, Ryan mused, pouring himself a drink from Bryson's bar. Word is, Holloway tried to start a new business, but no one will fund him. He's toxic. Bryson exhaled through his nose. Expected. Conrad had spent years pretending to be a giant in the business world. But without his corporate empire? Without the connections that had once shielded him? He was nothing. The best part? Ryan continued. He's in talks to sell his penthouse. Bryson arched a brow. Ryan grinned. Turns out, his ex-wife is bleeding him dry. Bryson tapped his fingers against the desk, considering this new piece of information. Lillian. Still clawing at a sinking ship. He should have felt satisfied. Should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt nothing. Conrad's downfall was inevitable. Lillian's regret? Predictable. This was never just about them. It was about him. His power. His control. His future. And now, he had it all. Sophia walked into Bryson's office without knocking, carrying a coffee in one hand and a stack of reports in the other. Bryson smirked. You always make yourself at home. She slid into the chair across from him, placing the coffee on his desk. That's because I like reminding you that you're not the only one who calls the shots around here. Bryson chuckled, leaning back. Is that right? Sophia arched a brow. Absolutely. For weeks they had been working together, partnering on investments, expanding Calloway Enterprises into new markets. But it wasn't just business. It was something else. Something dangerous. Something undeniable. Sophia crossed her legs, studying him. You've been quiet today. Bryson exhaled. I'm thinking. About Holloway, she guessed. Bryson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze back to the skyline. No, he finally said. Not anymore. Sophia tilted her head. Good. Because you already won. Bryson smirked. I know. She leaned in slightly. Then what's next, Calloway? He met her gaze, his smirk deepening. Everything. Sophia grinned. Now that's what I like to hear. Because this wasn't just revenge anymore. This was about building something unstoppable. And Bryson Calloway? He was just getting started. He was never looking back. I hope you all have subscribed by now. And don't forget to leave your lovely and positive comments. Let me know how you found the story and which part you liked the most. Looking forward to your feedback. The high-end lounge was filled with the city's elite, investors, CEOs, power players. The kind of people who only spoke in whispers and deals. Bryson rarely attended events like this, but tonight? Tonight he made an exception. Because he knew she would be there. And he wasn't wrong. Across the room at the bar stood Lillian. She looked different. Still polished. Still beautiful. But there was something hollow behind her eyes. Like a woman who had finally realized she had bet on the wrong man. Bryson took his time walking toward the bar, his movements controlled, confident. Lillian turned just as he reached her side. Her breath hitched. Bryson. He smirked, leaning against the bar. Lillian. Her eyes searched his, looking for something, anything. A crack in his composure. A sign that she still mattered. But there was nothing. Just the cold, undeniable truth. She had lost him. For good. Lillian swallowed. I didn't expect to see you here. Bryson took a sip of his drink. Funny. I knew you'd be here. She shifted, her hands gripping the stem of her wine glass. Bryson, save it. His voice was calm, cutting. Lillian's throat bobbed. Her voice wavered. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Bryson tilted his head slightly, his smirk never faltering. Tell me, Lillian. His voice was quiet but sharp as a knife. Did you feel sorry when you walked out that night? Silence. Lillian's hands trembled. Bryson exhaled, shaking his head. I didn't think so. She blinked rapidly, trying to steady herself. I was stupid, Bryson. I see that now. He chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Good. Then you've learned something. Her eyes pleaded. Bryson finished his drink and set the glass down. But here's the thing, Lillian. She swallowed hard. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for her to hear. I don't forgive you. Lillian's breath hitched. She had expected anger. Expected him to lash out. But this was worse. Because Bryson didn't just hate her. He had erased her. He straightened, slipping a crisp $100 bill onto the bar for the bartender. Enjoy your night, Lillian, he said smoothly. Then, without another glance, he walked away, leaving her standing in the ruins of her own choices. Lillian stood frozen at the bar, her hands gripping the stem of her glass so tightly she thought it might shatter. Bryson's words echoed in her head. I don't forgive you. She had expected anger. Expected him to lash out, to curse her, to tell her exactly how much she had destroyed him. But instead, he had looked at her like she was nothing. And that hurt worse than anything. Her breathing was shallow, her chest tight. She had spent months convincing herself that she could fix this. That Bryson had been waiting for her to come back. That he still cared. But now she realized the truth. He was done. Completely, utterly, and permanently done with her. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. Her last lifeline. She dialed Conrad's number. Ring, ring, ring. Voicemail. Lillian clenched her jaw, blinking rapidly. No. She called again. Voicemail. Her throat tightened. She pulled up their last conversation, the one where Conrad had told her to figure it out herself. She had betrayed one man for another. And now, both of them had left her behind. For the first time in her life, Lillian was completely alone. Bryson sat in his private lounge, sipping whiskey as the city lights stretched out before him. For the first time in years he felt peace. It wasn't the revenge. It wasn't Conrad's downfall or Lillian's regret. It was the simple, quiet realization that he was free. Sophia sat across from him, watching him closely. You're different tonight. Bryson smirked. Good different or bad different? She tilted her head. The kind of different that comes from letting go. Bryson leaned back, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. She wasn't wrong. For so long he had been chasing ghosts. Trying to prove something, to Lillian, to himself, to the world. But now there was nothing left to prove. He had won. But more importantly, he had moved on. Sophia studied him. So what now, Calloway? He smirked. Now, I build. She raised an eyebrow. Build what? Bryson exhaled, his eyes sharp. Something bigger than before. Something untouchable. Sophia grinned. Sounds like you need a partner. Bryson chuckled. You volunteering? She leaned in, her smirk matching his. Depends. Can you keep up? For the first time in years, Bryson felt something he hadn't expected. Excitement. Not for revenge. Not for destruction. For the future. Bryson stood at the edge of his private estate, the ocean waves crashing against the shore below. The air was different here. Cleaner. Quieter. Uncomplicated. He had spent so long in the trenches, fighting battles, taking down enemies, proving his worth. But here there was nothing to fight. Ryan walked up beside him, hands in his pockets. You know, most people would take a vacation after what you pulled off. Bryson smirked. I'm not most people. Ryan chuckled. No, you're not. Silence stretched between them, the only sound the crashing waves below. Then Ryan exhaled. So, is this it? Bryson arched a brow. What do you mean? Ryan gestured toward the horizon. You've won. You've built an empire. You've buried the people who tried to take you down. He turned to face Bryson. What else is left? Bryson took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze steady. There's always something left. Ryan studied him for a moment, then nodded. Because he knew the truth. Bryson Calloway wasn't the kind of man who stopped moving. Not even now. Not even after he had won. The city stretched below Bryson's penthouse, a glittering maze of power, wealth, and control. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets as his phone buzzed once more. Lillian. Again. He had ignored her calls for weeks. Blocked her once. Yet she found ways to reach him. But this time? This time he answered. Bryson, she breathed, her voice uneven, filled with desperation. Silence. Then, calmly, coldly, he said, Why are you still calling me? Lillian swallowed hard. I needed to see you. One last time. His jaw tightened. One last time? Her voice cracked. I just need closure. Bryson exhaled slowly. Closure. The word felt meaningless coming from her. She hadn't wanted closure when she walked out. She hadn't needed closure when she chose Conrad, when she threw away everything they had built. But now that she had nothing left, now she wanted closure? Bryson smirked. Fine. One last time. Lillian's breath hitched. Thank you. He hung up. Because this wasn't for her. This was for him. Lillian stepped into the high-end lounge, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She had spent hours preparing for this. Choosing the right dress. Doing her hair. Applying just enough makeup to look effortless. Because a part of her still thought maybe he would look at her the way he used to. Like she mattered. But when Bryson walked in, her heart sank. He was composed, sharp in a tailored suit, exuding the same power that had once belonged to Conrad. But there was something else. Something new. A lightness in his expression. A confidence that wasn't for her. It was for himself. He took a seat across from her, unbothered, unfazed. You wanted this meeting. Talk. Lillian clenched her hands in her lap. I needed to tell you how sorry I am. Bryson didn't react. He just watched her. Studied her. She swallowed hard. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Silence. Then Bryson smirked. I know. Lillian blinked. You know? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Lillian, I don't need your apology. Her breath hitched. Because you're not important enough to need forgiveness. The words hit her like a slap. For months she had told herself she could fix this. That she could make him see that she was still worth it. But now she realized the truth. Bryson had erased her. And this wasn't a conversation. This was a goodbye. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Bryson stood, adjusting his cufflinks. Have a good life, Lillian. Then, without a second glance, he walked away. Leaving her behind, exactly where she belonged. Bryson stepped into the night air, exhaling slowly. He had expected to feel something. Relief, satisfaction, anything. But instead he felt nothing at all. Because Lillian was just a ghost now. A mistake he had left behind. Ryan leaned against the car waiting for him, arms crossed. How did it go? Bryson smirked. Exactly as expected. Ryan chuckled. So that's it then? Bryson nodded. That's it. He climbed into the car, exhaling. For so long he had been focused on revenge. On proving himself. But the truth? He didn't need revenge. Because he had already won. And now it was time to start the next chapter. Bryson Calloway sat in the private lounge of one of the most exclusive clubs in the city, a glass of aged whiskey in his hand. The air was thick with the quiet murmurs of power, men who made deals worth millions over a single handshake. But tonight, Bryson wasn't here to make deals. He was here to witness the final collapse of Conrad Holloway. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen. Ryan. He answered, his voice calm. Talk to me. Ryan chuckled. You're gonna love this. Holloway finally broke. His last investor just pulled out. Bryson swirled his drink, smirking. And he's desperate, Ryan continued. Tried to sell off what's left of his assets, but no one's buying. He's got lawsuits piling up. Fraud charges coming. The whole thing's a mess. Bryson exhaled slowly. It was over. Conrad had lost everything. Where is he now? Bryson asked. Ryan hesitated before responding. At a bar downtown. Drinking himself stupid. Bryson chuckled. Of course. The great Conrad Holloway, once an untouchable CEO, now nothing more than a man drowning in his own mistakes. Bryson leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. Let him rot, he said simply. Because Holloway wasn't a threat anymore. He was just another lesson in arrogance. Conrad Holloway sat at the end of a dimly lit bar, a nearly empty glass in front of him. His once pristine suit was wrinkled. His hair disheveled. The bartender had stopped making small talk hours ago. Because no one cared about a fallen king. Conrad exhaled sharply, his mind spinning. He had spent years clawing his way to the top. He had crushed competitors, manipulated deals, done whatever it took to win. And now he had nothing. His investors had left. His employees had abandoned ship. His name was now synonymous with failure. And it was all because of one man. Bryson Calloway. His grip tightened around his glass. He had underestimated him. Had treated him like he was small. But the truth? Bryson had been playing the long game all along. A bitter laugh escaped Conrad's lips. Well played, Calloway, he muttered. But now there was nothing left to fight for. He tossed back the last of his drink, signaling for another. Because at this point, all he could do was drink. Bryson leaned against the balcony of his penthouse, the wind ruffling his shirt. The city stretched before him. His city. Sophia joined him, handing him a drink. You're quiet tonight. Bryson exhaled. Just thinking. Sophia smirked. About how you won? Bryson chuckled, shaking his head. No. About what comes next. For so long, his life had been about proving something. About getting back at those who had wronged him. But now he had nothing left to prove. Sophia studied him. So what's next, Calloway? Bryson glanced at her, smirking. Something bigger. She arched a brow. Oh. He turned back to the skyline, his eyes gleaming. I built myself from the ground up once, he said. Now I do it again. But this time, I go global. Sophia let out a low whistle. Ambitious. Bryson took a slow sip of his drink. Always. Because revenge had never been the endgame. It was just the beginning. Bryson Calloway wasn't a man who smiled often. Not because he was bitter. Not because he was broken. But because he didn't waste emotions on things that didn't matter. And for the first time in years he realized he was happy. Not because he had destroyed Conrad. Not because he had left Lillian in the ruins of her own choices. But because he was finally free. He walked into Calloway Enterprises' new headquarters, the scent of fresh construction still in the air. A new empire. A new legacy. His employees moved like a well-oiled machine, completely unaware that their CEO had once been just another man in the background. Now he was the one people whispered about in boardrooms. Morning, sir, his assistant greeted as she handed him a folder. Bryson nodded, flipping through the reports. All good news. All progress. His phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. Dinner tonight? Bryson smirked. He typed back. You're getting too comfortable, Reed. Her response was instant. You love it. He chuckled, shaking his head. She wasn't wrong. Because this was what happiness felt like. Not revenge. Not proving people wrong. But knowing that he had built something unstoppable. And this time, no one could take it from him. The waves crashed against the shore, the golden sun dipping beneath the horizon. Bryson sat on the deck of his private estate, a glass of bourbon in his hand, watching the ocean stretch endlessly before him. Ryan sat beside him, arms crossed. You ever think about it? Bryson smirked. Think about what? Ryan exhaled. How it all started. Lillian. Holloway. The betrayal. The war. Bryson took a slow sip of his drink, staring out at the water. Did he think about it? Of course. But not the way Ryan expected. Because the truth was, he wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't bitter. Wasn't holding on to the past. Because that life no longer existed. The man who had once been betrayed? He was gone. The man who had lost everything? He didn't exist anymore. Bryson smirked. I think about it the same way you think about old battle scars. Ryan raised a brow. Yeah. Bryson nodded. You remember how you got them. But they don't hurt anymore. Ryan chuckled. Fair enough. A comfortable silence stretched between them. Then Ryan leaned back, grinning. So, now that you've conquered the world, what's next? Bryson exhaled, watching the sky darken. I keep going. Because this wasn't the end. It was just another beginning. Bryson sat at an exclusive gala, sipping his whiskey as power players moved around the room. Tonight wasn't about deals. It wasn't about business. Tonight was about watching. Because the world was his playground now. A familiar presence slid into the seat beside him. Sophia. She smirked. You look bored, Calloway? Bryson chuckled. I'm never bored. She arched a brow. Then why are you sitting here alone? He glanced at her, amused. Because I like watching people try to impress me. She laughed. Arrogant. He smirked. Accurate. Sophia studied him for a moment. So tell me, Bryson. Was this always the plan? Bryson exhaled, swirling his drink. No. She tilted her head. No. Bryson leaned forward slightly. I never planned on being here. I never planned on being this man. Her gaze sharpened. Then how did you become him? Bryson smirked, leaning back. Destiny. Sophia grinned. I like that answer. Bryson raised his glass. Then here's to destiny. They clinked glasses, the sound sharp against the background noise of the gala. Because this was exactly where he was meant to be. Not because of revenge. Not because of pain. But because some men were simply built to rise. The world was watching. Bryson Calloway had built his empire quietly, moving in the shadows, taking down enemies without them even knowing he was there. But now his name was everywhere. He sat in his office, the glow of the city reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the news play on one of his massive screens. Holloway Enterprises declares bankruptcy. Former CEO vanishes from public eye. Bryson smirked. Conrad was gone. The lawsuits had drained him. The fraud charges had shattered any chance of rebuilding. The industry had turned its back on him. And now, he was just another cautionary tale. Ryan walked in, placing a folder on the desk. Final paperwork. This officially dissolves the last remnants of Holloway Enterprises. It's done. Bryson leaned back, nodding slowly. It was over. For so long, he had been focused on destroying the man who betrayed him. But now Conrad Holloway wasn't even worth thinking about. Good, Bryson said, signing the final document. Ryan chuckled. You're a ruthless bastard, Calloway? Bryson smirked. I know. Because this wasn't revenge anymore. This was justice. And justice had been served. Lillian sat in the corner of a quiet cafe, staring at her phone. The screen was blank. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing. For weeks she had tried to reach out. Tried to find a way back into Bryson's life. But every attempt? Ignored. She wasn't angry. She wasn't shocked. She was just empty. She had believed Conrad would be her future. That wealth, power, and status were what mattered. And now she had none of it. She had lost everything. A waiter placed a cup of coffee in front of her. Courtesy of the gentleman at the bar. Her heart skipped. For a moment she thought, hoped, that it was Bryson. That maybe, just maybe, he had come back. But when she turned, was a stranger. Not him. Never him. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Because Bryson Calloway was never coming back. And she would spend the rest of her life regretting it. Bryson stood on the balcony of his private villa in Italy, the scent of the sea filling the air. This was his life now. Powerful. Untouchable. Free. Sophia walked up beside him, holding 2 glasses of wine. You look like a man who's finally at peace. Bryson smirked, accepting the glass. I am. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing ghosts. He wasn't proving anything to anyone. He had already won. Sophia leaned against the balcony railing. No more revenge? Bryson chuckled, taking a slow sip. No more revenge. She studied him. And what about love? He exhaled, gazing out at the horizon. That depends. She arched a brow. On what? Bryson turned to her, smirking. On whether it's worth my time. Sophia laughed. Now that's the Calloway I know. Because this was his story now. Not Lillian's. Not Conrad's. And he was just getting started. The city skyline stretched before Bryson, the golden hues of the setting sun reflecting off the glass buildings. He stood at the edge of his private rooftop, drink in hand, watching as his empire thrived beneath him. He had conquered everything, built himself back up. And yet, there was something different now. For so long, revenge had been his fuel. Destroying Conrad, breaking Lillian, proving to the world that no one could touch him. But revenge was a fire that burned hot and fast. And once the flames died out, what was left? Bryson exhaled slowly, taking a sip of his drink. Sophia joined him, her presence grounding. You've been quiet all day, she noted. Bryson smirked slightly. Thinking. She tilted her head, curious. About what? He turned to her, meeting her gaze. About what's next. She studied him. You're not satisfied? Bryson chuckled, shaking his head. I am. But I've spent so much time looking backward, at what was taken from me, at what I lost, at the people who betrayed me. He turned back to the skyline, his expression unreadable. I think it's time I start looking forward. Sophia smiled, stepping closer. That's what I like to hear. Bryson exhaled, the tension in his chest easing. Because for the first time he wasn't chasing the past. He was chasing the future. And this time, it belonged to him alone. The night was calm. The city below alive with energy, movement, life. Bryson sat on the rooftop's edge, drink forgotten beside him, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He had won. But this wasn't just about winning. It was about becoming. The man he was now, the one sitting here, untouchable, unshaken, wasn't the same man who had been left behind by Lillian. That man had been broken. This man? This man had rebuilt himself from the ground up. No anger. No regret. No need for revenge anymore. Just power. Peace. Control. Ryan's voice interrupted his thoughts. Calloway. Bryson turned, smirking. You only use my last name when you're about to ask for a favor. Ryan chuckled. I know you're done with the whole revenge game, but there's a new business deal on the table. High risk, high reward. Thought I'd get your take. Bryson exhaled, standing and straightening his suit. High risk, high reward. That was his life. He turned to Ryan, smirk in place. Let's talk. Because this was the real end. Not of his story, but of the man he used to be. And the beginning of something far greater. Before you go, a final question. If you were in Bryson's shoes, would you have done the same? Would you have taken revenge? Or would you have walked away? Tell me in the comments, I want to know. And by the way, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. Oh, and before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because trust me, this is just the beginning. I'll see you in the next thrilling story. Until then, take care.